topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good morning. Welcome to another Ask the Expert show where we bring you the top experts in the field of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. This is the first Wednesday of the month, and that means a show that I circle every month I am so excited about this show. I'm so excited about this show. We actually replay it every week. Every Wednesday at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. And none of our shows do we actually even allow that, but this show is so important. Let me introduce you to, I now call my friend, Dr. Eldred Taylor of the Taylor Medical Group. Good morning, Dr. Taylor. Hey, I made you smile.
We are friends. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. We've been together almost 3 years, so
Yes.
we need to be friends, or we don't want to be the opposite. If we were enemies, I wouldn't still be doing this
Yeah. Dr. Taylor, I am so in awe of where you've come from. Because I don't know, you start off as an OB-GYN doctor, and let me tell you something, OB-GYN doctors, they make a lot of money, but their hours are incredible. And you basically gave up this incredible practice you had because you saw a need for in the area of medicine that a lot of people don't even understand. And it has evolved. We started off with weight loss, then we went to stress. And I have learned so much from your show, Dr. Taylor. And you made a trip to Egypt, and I guess it's kind of changed your life.
Yeah. Well, that was just the beginning of the change. Well, so I'll start from the beginning. Yeah, I was conventionally trained in OBGYN. And I practiced that for about 6 or 7 years until my wife started having hormone problems. And I was doing what I was taught in conventional medicine. And because I lived with her 24/7, I saw that it was not working. It was not helping her. So luckily, I listened to this patient who gave me a cassette tape. I listened to this guy talking about bioidentical hormones and progesterone and all this. And I like, what the heck? I'll listen to it, and it really changed my life. So I have to give thanks to that patient. I wish I knew who she was. I would take her out to dinner and send her on a trip or whatever, because she was the beginning of that change. And so from that, I started to realize that I didn't learn everything that I needed to know in medical school. And they always say that, hey, whatever you learned in medical school is going to be obsolete in 10 years. Well, I've been out of medical school for 30 years, so it's definitely obsolete. So from there, I got interested in other things that I didn't learn, and the number one thing is I started uh, speaking at these conferences about my book about hormones, and I was listening to other speakers talk about stress. So I heard that 75 to 90% of all visits to primary care physicians are for stress related complaints or disorders. So I'm like, hey, if I come from the viewpoint that this person is probably dealing with some stressful issue, I'm going to be right 75 to 90% of the time. And in this environment, it's probably 99% of the time is due to stress. So I've tried to become an expert in stress and wrote this book called The Stress Connection. So we talked about that, and that's how I kind of run my practice is I'm always looking for what stress caused this problem. Well, now through meditation, I'm understanding that the next book I need to write, or the next thing I'm going to talk about, is the stress disconnection. And how you disconnect from stress is what we're going to talk about today, is through meditation. So that's kind of my story. And so, I've evolved, like you said, I've evolved now. I will tell you that the reason why I went to Egypt is because I took this course, and I want to give him credit, called the Reality Creator. And this is a young 26, 27-year-old guy who is teaching me about meditation and how you can create your reality. And I have created my reality. And the number one thing I had to get over is fear. And I'll tell you, I had, my number one fear was fear of water. I didn't like to swim. I like to look at the water. I didn't like to go in it. So he said, you got to overcome that biggest fear. So I took a scuba diving lesson, and that kind of got me to be fearless. And after that, I said I wanted to go to Egypt, and I wanted to understand spirituality, because I'm a scientist, but my dad was a minister, a Baptist minister. And I've always wanted to understand spirituality in the form of science. And there's something called Kemetic science, that is the spirituality science that the ancient Egyptians had. So that's really why I went there. I wanted to understand this Kemetic spirituality. That's what they called it, Kemetic spirituality. And from that's led me to this point. And I only went to Egypt in December. This is April. So, but I've been on like a crazy search. My wife is getting concerned about me because I hardly sleep. If I can sleep 4 or 5 hours, I'm good. I wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning just waiting to see what I can learn next. So she's like, you got to get some sleep. You got to get some sleep. So I actually got a good night's sleep last night. I'm ready for this show this morning. So let's talk about meditation.
Yes, I want to bring this up. You met a gentleman when you were over in Egypt.
Yeah.
That have you corresponded with him since you've gotten back?
I wish. I gave him my email, and he said he had access to a phone, and I don't know, how hard that is for him. But yeah, he kind of personified what Kemetic spirituality is about. It's about balance and harmony, and that leads to peace. It's as simple as that. So our first book about hormones was about balancing hormones. And my book about stress is really about creating harmony, because stress causes disharmony. Okay. So, and that's what meditation is about, is to try and get this disharmony back into harmony. So this guy had lived in these caves, and where there's no internet, there's no CNN, there's no Fox News, there's no none of that. They live in nature, and they live by the laws of nature. And he is the personification of peace. And because he's in balance with nature, and he's in harmony with nature. And that's how everything in nature works. I go out and look at my garden now. That's nature. It's in balance. They get sunshine, they get rain, they die, they come back. It's just, now I understand how these cycles work, that these flowers, they bloom, and then they flourish, and then they die, and then they come back. That is nature. We're all a part of nature. We're all made up of energy in this quantum field. In one of my these other podcasts, I talked about that dream I had about quantum physics, and that explains everything about spirituality, about who we are, what we are in nature. And that's what we're going to talk about in my podcast, Ageless Blueprint. We're going to really try and talk about quantum physics, because the Ageless Blueprint is the quantum field. The quantum field has all possibilities. You can create your blueprint, and that's been around since for eternity. This quantum field has all possibilities. And the ageless blueprint is that you can focus on a certain outcome, and the quantum field will provide the blueprint to get you there. So it's kind of, we think of it as, kind of this new age stuff, but it's pure hard science. And that's what Again, I'm a doctor, I'm a scientist, but I'm also have a lot of spirituality in me because of how I was raised.
You were
And
raised.
when you marry those two, man, it is so eye-opening and freeing when you can marry those two, that I can scientifically say or believe in spirituality and what it has to offer. So that's it. If you get me started, it's hard for me to stop. So we're supposed to talk about
That's good.
meditation.
You know what? We're going to talk about meditation today, but stress is one of the things that you really talk about. A lot
Yeah.
of people don't know what stress, the health issues it
Yeah.
causes.
Yeah. So, stress is anything that takes you out of homeostasis or anything that takes you out of balance. Okay. It can be your external environment, what you eat, what you breathe, what kind of activities you are involved in, but it's also internal. Okay. If internally you are in disharmony or you're in stress, you're worried about your job, you're worried about who's president or who's not president, you're worried about, your, and that's why I'm saying it's 99%, because I have a patient who works for the CDC, and she is worried out of her mind. And I had to talk her down. And I'm like, you're more than the CDC. You have
Right.
skills that you have developed that you don't have to be dependent upon who's president and who's the government. It's all about how can you change your focus. So my 4-step stress relief is: number one, if you can, get rid of the stress, whether it's what you're eating or what you're doing or your job or your marriage or your relationship with your friends or whatever. If you can get rid of that stress, that's the number one remedy. The second best thing is to change how you respond to the stress. And that's where meditation is so important. I used to tell that to patients, but I really didn't give them a clear uh, pathway to change how they respond to the stress. And meditation can do that, because when you meditate, you quiet your mind. You stop having those automatic thoughts about what happens if I lose my job, what happens if my wife leaves me, what happens if I, and so you're trying to predict the future. You're living in the past and you're predicting the future. So nothing can change as long as you're living in the past and predicting what might happen in the future. So that's why they tell you to focus on your breath, because breath by breath, if you focus on it, you can't be thinking about your past and you can't be predicting your future. Is what they call staying in the unknown. And if you know your past and you think you know your future, then nothing different can happen. Okay. So most people are scared of the unknown, and that's why nothing changes. But meditation takes you into the unknown. You're not thinking about your past, you're not thinking about your future, you're just thinking about your breath. And when you do that, it slows your brain waves down. You stop thinking these scattered thoughts. You start thinking organized thoughts. And then the next step you go through is when your brain is really calm, and that's when your conscious mind and your subconscious mind can communicate. And then you can figure out all of these unconscious programs that you've run all of your life that has led you to where you are right now. And this is all about this reality creation, is that you can start to think different thoughts, and that will allow you to believe different things about your future. And once you can coordinate your thoughts and your beliefs and your feelings, when they are focused on a certain outcome, that outcome has to materialize. And that's all this quantum physics stuff. What you think and what you believe creates your world. Okay? If you think the world is dangerous, you're going to live in fear. And fear is disorganized, it's stress. Okay? But if you think and believe, and the opposite of fear is love. And that's why I live by the 13th chapter of First Corinthians. It talks about love.
Yes.
Love is what creates good things. Fear creates chaos. Love creates organization. And that's where you can create whatever you want is created from a focus of love. So meditation quiets your mind. You just focus on your breath, minute by minute, or really breath by breath, and that quiets your mind. When your mind is quiet, you can take in different information to allow you to think different things. Okay. But when you're living in fear, you can't think different thoughts. You're only thinking about surviving that moment. You can't think about what can I do differently so that I can get out of this fearful, stressful state. So that's what's so important about meditation. And meditation has to be practiced. You can't do it once and think everything is going to change. What I've learned is that you have to live in a meditative state. It doesn't mean that you're living, you know, it's not living with your eyes closed and in this deep thought. It means that you're always meditating on what you want and not what is going on right now at this present moment. Because in this present moment, you may be in chaos. But if you're always thinking about getting out of this stress or creating a more organized world, then as you constantly think about that, it constructs the energy to create that. It's called the mirror principle. If your world is chaotic, it's because your internal world is chaotic. If your internal world is calm, your external world will be calm. It all starts from you and what you believe. And it's hard to believe something different when you are fearful, because all you're thinking about is surviving this fearful state. So that's meditation in a nutshell. Okay. So let me tell you one other thing. People say, I'm going to meditate and pray. Now, let me tell you what prayer is. Prayer is not doing this, getting on your knees and saying, God, please do this, God, please do that. Prayer is actually what you feel in your heart. With every heartbeat, you are sending out a signal, a energetic signal. And we know that because you've had an EKG, so you know your heart creates electricity. Okay? When you have electricity, you have an energetic field. So when the Bible says pray without ceasing, it's really saying you need to feel and believe what you want, what you're praying for. Feel it right now with every heartbeat. You need to feel what you want. That will create what you are desiring. So if you pray for 5 minutes to say, please God, do this, but in your heart, every heartbeat, you're still living in fear, nothing's going to change.
Wow.
Nothing's going to change. So when it pray without ceasing, it's like, how do you do that? I got to stay on my knees and do this and and I can't go to work. That's the only way I can get what I desire. No, if you have a feeling of love, because when I say faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love, you've got to have a feeling of love toward what you want. Okay. And you have to feel it with every heartbeat. This is something called heart brain coherence. And I'm going to teach that on Ageless Blueprint. Your thoughts and your feelings have to be coherent, and that sends out a signal to the quantum field to change the energy so that it becomes what you want. Now, and let me tell you, it's taken me 6 months to understand this. Okay. So I don't expect anybody to understand this in a 6 minute, monologue that I'm having.
Right.
But I'm going to tell you, this is what I learned in Egypt. When they pray, they do this. Okay. So they are at their heart level and they have one hand out and one hand here. What the ancient Egyptians were trying to tell us is that for them to have created that civilization, they knew that the center of creation is from the heart. And what they're doing is the heart is where you send out feelings, you send out what you desire, and also is the heart where you receive it. So if I have a thought or a feeling or I want to create something or I want you to feel something, I have to send it out through my heart. And then the heart is also a receptive organ also. And this is straight up physiology, biology, biochemistry, physics, all of that can be explained now. But the ancient Egyptians, and I'm going to tell you, all these ancient wisdom, the Hindi, the Buddha, all that, they understood that it's not the brain, it's the heart that controls your reality. And if you can send out a coherent message, this is what I want, and this is what I desire. And it's all in the Bible, is that he will give you your desires. You can do all these. And let me tell you, and I just wrote this, I'm gonna have a podcast about this, is that even Jesus said, I cannot do miracles in a place where you don't believe. You had to believe. It's not about, and this will be controversial. Well, I'm not even going to say it. It's about belief. If even Jesus could not get anything done around a bunch of people who didn't believe, then you can't do it either. Okay?
Right.
So that's why you got to get rid of negative people and stressful people. You have to get into a community where people believe. And that's what I'm trying to build in Ageless Blueprint. Have a community where people believe that they can be ageless, that this ageless information is important. And and a lot of people are like me, you discount it if you can't prove it. Okay. But now science is actually proving it. So, so hopefully more people will believe. And the other thing they're saying is that the way you change your world is that if you get enough people to believe in peace and love and harmony, the world will change. But all we get bombarded with is images of fear. And when you're in fearful, you are fearful of other people. So the Christians are afraid of the Muslims are afraid of the Christians, the Ukrainians are afraid of because we live in a world of fear. So we want to get rid of our fear. So we try to get rid of the person we think is causing our fear. Okay. And that's all we see. That's why you got to stop looking at the news. You got to stop looking at all of that stuff, and you've got to have your own belief. And if enough people believe that this world can be peaceful and full of love, and I don't want you to think I'm some 1960s hippie, even though I was born in the 60s, but but that's what it is all about. The greatest of these is love. Okay. So anyway, I could talk about
Dr.
this
Taylor, I got to get
forever.
this in. We got a text about 10 minutes ago from Misty in Savannah,
Okay.
and she's two points. One is, Dr. Taylor, I am becoming one of your biggest fans. Do you ever think about the lives that you touch on your show? That's her first question. And
Mhm.
her second question is, are there different ways to meditate?
Yes. Well, this is, I mean, when I say different ways to meditate, all of it is about quieting the mind and quieting the brain waves. And I'm going to tell you how one of the ways that I learned this is using this thing called Muse. And I'm a big proponent of this, because you put it on your head and you have a program, and while you're meditating, it's telling you, it will feed back to you when you are getting into a meditative state. It actually has
Wow.
biofeedback. It has biofeedback that when you hear the birds chirping, you know that you are going from beta waves to alpha waves. And you learn how to breathe and to quiet your mind so that you get into that state. And then once you get into that state, if you keep going, you can get into this theta state, where it's a state of hypnosis where you can actually take in information. And that's when, you see these hypnotists, they get you in a state and then they can tell you you're a bird or whatever, and you'll start acting like a bird or whatever. That's real. That's real. You don't have to act like, but if you start to put information in, like, I love my family, you start to think these better thoughts, then that reprograms you. All right. So it is a science, it is a skill that has to be practiced. And I have gotten better and better. I used to couldn't meditate for 2 minutes. Now I can meditate for 30 minutes, with a guided meditation. So and there's all kinds of apps. I started with this app called Declutter the Mind. And I did this 30-day mindfulness uh, course, and that really helped me because I'm telling you, when I first started, I'm trying to sit there and not think about anything and all this stuff, and it was just hard. And then as time went on, it became easier and easier, and now it is 100%. It's like brushing my teeth. I got to do it every day. And I also try and live in a meditative state all day long, where I'm always it's talking about being conscious of your unconscious actions. Because 95% of the things you do, you're doing it unconsciously. You don't know why you're doing it. So meditation allows you to see what your unconscious program is, and allows you to start changing that program. So that's what's important about it. So now what used to be unconscious for me is different. Now, unconsciously, I stay in a meditative state. Okay, I'm always looking at what I'm doing and saying, is that something that I desire to do, or I'm just doing it automatically? And that's how I changed my relationship with my wife. I was doing some unconscious things based on some past hurts that we may have had over 38 years. And over 38 years, you're going to have some hurts, you
Right.
know? So I started saying, hey, I'm going to consciously react to my wife based on the present moment, not something that happened over the last 38 years. And I told you, my relationship with my wife has never been better. Where after 38 years, usually like, why did I
Yeah,
marry this
right.
woman? I'm sick of this woman. I'm like, no, it's gone the total other way, because now I'm conscious and I'm always coming from a baseline of love. Anything I say to her has to be based in love, not in fear, not in anger, not in resentment, not in guilt, not in obligation. I felt like I did a lot of things for her because I was obligated as a husband. No, now I do it as love. And she knows the difference. She always knew the difference.
And
Okay.
she's a
Mhm.
psychiatrist.
She's a psychiatrist, and
Yeah.
she said, hey, I know if I cooked or that and I was attached to some outcome. If I do this, she'll do that. If I do that, she'll do. No, it's just I do it because I love her. I do it because I made a commitment to her. I love her because we are attached emotionally, spiritually, everything. And so I'm telling you, after 38 years, to be more in love with your wife and your children and your life, that's why I'm, you know,
And
I'm like this all the time, because it has totally changed my outlook on life.
I know we're running late. Dr. Taylor,
Yeah.
tell people how they can reach you and about your podcast.
Yeah, I'm gonna start having a podcast. I'm gonna stay here because, like I said, I'm loyal, and but it's called Ageless Blueprint. Hopefully, it's gonna start on the 9th, next Wednesday at 9 o'clock. And I've been talking about it, and I just got to start doing it. I got to do what Nike says, just do it. So
Yeah.
we're gonna get started. And I tell you the best way, I would love for you to join my school group, www.skool/ageless. And that's where every day, almost every day, I try and post something. And I posted something today about what I'm talking about, prayer and meditation and the difference between the two. So yeah, I'd love for you to join that. And I'd love for you to come on our podcast. And and so I know we're out of time, but thanks so much for the opportunity to kind of spill my
If you
guts.
missed today's show, it's going to be replayed next week at the same time. Dr. Taylor, all I can say is from one believer to the next, God bless you. We are
Yeah.
so blessed to have you. And we'll see you live again next month.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much.
And that's, we're going to go to break. When we come back, we have our next expert.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.